Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are exploring one of the most incredible stories of isolated ingenuity ever documented. When you think about it, what happens when an astronaut, and he's a botanist actually, is presumed dead, left behind on Mars, wakes up completely alone and realizes he is, what, 99 million miles from home?
It's an almost unbelievable scenario. And this isn't science fiction today. We're actually synthesizing the real logs, the technical reports, mission data, everything detailing the survival efforts of astronaut Mark Watney. This deep dive is really all about extreme resourcefulness. We're charting his journey from Sol 6, the day of that catastrophic windstorm,
Right.
all the way to this desperate space rendezvous more than 500 sols later. It's quite a story.
Yeah, and our goal today is to go, well, beyond just the surface plot. We want to synthesize the precise scientific, the botanical, and the engineering solutions Watney actually came up with, those aha moments. We're going to try and show you exactly how one man turned Martian dirt, incredibly dangerous rocket fuel, and frankly, sheer grit into a 4-year survival plan. You're basically about to get a shortcut to understanding the genuine technical challenges and solutions for staying alive on a dead planet.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. The sheer improbability of him even surviving that first incident on Sol 6.
Yeah, the storm.
Yeah, the storm. The Ares 3 crew was evacuating because of this severe windstorm, and we're talking gusts up to 125 kilometers per hour. Now, on Earth, that's, barely hurricane force.
Right.
But in the super thin Martian atmosphere, it generates enough drag to turn, flying equipment into basically a lethal projectile.
And that's exactly what happened, right? Some piece of wreckage just slammed into Watney.
It did. And the telemetry from his suit showed this rapid depressurization. So the true commander, Lewis, she had to make that impossible call, initiate the emergency MAV abort sequence. They had to assume he was gone, instantly lost.
Based on the data, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only logical conclusion.
But the physics of how he actually survived, it's fascinating. The impact that breached his suit also, kind of ironically, saved his life. Because the antenna that hit him got jammed into the hole at this strongly oblique angle.
Okay, so it partially plugged it.
Exactly, a weak initial seal. But the really unique, almost gruesome saving mechanism was his own biology. He bled quite a bit. And that blood, exposed to the near vacuum, it flash evaporated its water content,
Wow.
leaving behind this thick, gunky protein residue. And that reduced the leak enough that the suit's internal systems could actually keep up. It was like an involuntary immediate bioseal made from his own blood.
That is just the ultimate aha moment of pure terrifying chance. Okay. So he gets back inside the hab, somehow manages to stitch himself up. He realizes his limiting factor isn't necessarily oxygen right away, is it?
Not immediately, no. The suit's pressure integrity was, restored enough. And the oxygen level, that could be replenished continuously from his nitrogen tank. The real immediate bottleneck for his life support.
What's it?
Carbon dioxide, CO2 absorption. The suit and the rover, too, they use these expendable filters. LiOH, lithium hydroxide filters. Chemical absorbers, basically, designed for short-term use.
Okay.
Once those were full, saturated, he'd die pretty quickly from CO2 poisoning. The big oxygenator machine in the hab, the one that chemically breaks down CO2, that wasn't portable. So his survival basically hinges on keeping the main hab intact, the water reclaimer working, and that oxygenator running. Breathing, drinking, staying warm. The basics.
So he's alone. He's the lowest ranked crew member, technically. And he notes in his first log, kind of grimly, that since everyone else is gone, well, he's now in command, he has to figure out what he actually has to work with.
Yeah, and the isolation is just total. Absolutely. The MAV, the ascent vehicle that left, it took the powerful relay systems, the ones designed for deep space communication.
Right, the long-range stuff.
Gone. His primary satellite dish, physically broken off by debris in the storm, and the secondary comm systems, they were only programmed to talk to the MAV, which was, gone.
So no way to call home.
None. And the really critical logistical point is that Hermes, the mothership, it had to leave Mars orbit within 24 hours of the abort. For safety, for orbital mechanics, for the trajectory back to Earth. They couldn't just hang around for a quick look-see. Watney was, by definition, utterly alone.
Okay, so he starts taking stock of the hardware, the hab itself, the pressurized shelter. It was only designed for a short mission, right? Like 31 days.
That's right, 31 sols. Its canvas integrity was absolutely central to his immediate survival. Any significant breach meant, he put it as kind of sudden explosive decompression. Game over.
Yeah, not good. What about power?
Power initially actually looked okay, manageable. He had 200 square meters of solar cells. But, and this is a big but, On Mars, to keep them working well, he logs that he had to physically sweep the dust off them every few days.
That ubiquitous Martian dust.
Exactly, it's everywhere. That constant sweeping gave him plenty of power, though, and it was backed up by hydrogen fuel cells for reserve for nighttime or emergencies.
Okay, now for the big one. The most critical resource assessment.
Yeah.
Food.
Right. The Ares 3 mission was stocked for 6 people for 56 souls. Since only 6 souls had passed before the accident.
He had most of it left.
He had most of it.
Yeah.
That stockpile, if he rationed it strictly for just one person, would last him approximately 300 souls.
300 days. Martian days.
Roughly, yeah. And that 300-sol window, that was the single most vital piece of information he had right then.
Yeah.
It wasn't nearly enough to get him to the Ares 4 arrival date. That was still, like, over 1,500 souls away.
Wow. Yeah, a huge gap.
A huge gap. But it bought him time, absolutely critical time to move from just immediate trauma and patching himself up to complex long-term scientific planning. He had roughly 10 Earth months to figure out how to become a Martian farmer.
Okay, so section 2 then. Making Mars feed him. Moving from that 300-sol buffer to somehow stretching it past Sol 1,500. That's the ultimate food problem. And Watney, the botanist, he knew Martian soil wasn't exactly Iowa topsoil.
Not even close. The Martian regolith, it's got basic minerals, sure, lots of iron oxide, hence the red color. But for growing potatoes, terrible. It's sterile, it lacks any bacterial activity, any life, and crucial nutrients like fixed nitrogen aren't readily available.
So he had to make his own soil, essentially.
He did, and his plan required just massive, back-breaking physical labor. He needed to bring 9.2 cubic meters of Martian soil into the hab.
9.2 cubic meters. How much is that?
Think about. It's roughly 325 cubic feet. And he couldn't just open the door and shovel it in. He had to haul it, bit by bit, 1/10 of a cubic meter at a time, through the airlock cycle to prevent losing the hab's atmosphere.
Oh my God, the repetition.
Weeks. It took him weeks of just that relentless hauling. Airlock cycle, dump soil, go back out, repeat.
And then, once he had the dirt inside, he needed fertilizer to kickstart the biology, which came from, well, the most readily available organic source.
So, yes, his own waste, what farmers call night soil. He absolutely understood the risk, spreading human pathogens in a totally closed environment. But
He was the only human.
he was the only human, so the risk was contained to him alone. It was a calculated, necessary gamble. He mixed the waste in thoroughly, and then, the crucial step, he sprinkled the small amount of earth soil he'd brought for analysis on top.
So that contained the microbes.
Exactly. That little bit of earth dirt contained the necessary anaerobic bacteria to start the nitrogen-fixing cycle to actually make the Martian regolith fertile.
Okay, soil created. How did he maximize the actual potato yield? He had, 126 square meters of potential farmland, using the floor and even the crew bunks.
Right. He started with 12 potatoes, and critically, these were refrigerated whole potatoes, not the freeze-dried rations, meaning they were still biologically viable.
They could sprout.
They could sprout. He cut each one into 4 pieces, making absolutely sure each piece had at least 2 eyes, those little nodes where sprouts form. But his real breakthrough, the thing that accounted for his estimated 50% higher yield compared to standard earth farming, it was density and depth.
How so?
Instead of just planting and letting them go, he individually trimmed the plants as they grew and then replanted the cuttings deeper and much closer together. He was basically micromanaging every single plant to minimize wasted space and maximize the plant mass that could utilize the limited volume of his homemade soil.
That is some serious intensive farming.
Incredibly intensive. And this farming success, it pushed his projected survival timeline way out, past Sol 850. Suddenly, reaching the Ares 4 arrival time seemed, well, maybe not likely, but possible.
A staggering botanical achievement. But like you said, every solution creates a new problem, a new bottleneck. His successful farm needed a lot of water. 368 liters total, he calculated.
And the hab only started with 300 liters 50 per crew member. He was over 250 liters short, just for the potatoes, let alone his own needs.
So water becomes the next impossible problem.
Exactly. And this is where Watney has to pivot. He goes from botanist to, let's call it volatile chemical engineer. He had to literally manufacture water, HO, from hydrogen and oxygen.
Okay, oxygen.
Oxygen was, relatively speaking, the easy part. The MAV fuel plant, which was fortunately left behind at the landing site, it had the ability to crack Martian CO2, which is abundant in the atmosphere, into O2, oxygen, and carbon. So he had a steady supply of oxygen via the hab's oxygenator processing the CO2.
Got it. So oxygen's covered, but hydrogen. Where does he get hydrogen on Mars?
From the leftovers.
Yeah.
Residual rocket fuel, hydrazine, and neuro. It was still stored in the tanks of the MDV, the Mars descent vehicle that Martinez landed perfectly.
Ah, the lander fuel.
Precisely. Hydrazine, its chemical formula and euro, it contains 4 hydrogen atoms per molecule. He calculated he had about 292 liters of hydrazine left, and from that, he figured he could generate almost 600 liters of water, more than enough for the farm and himself.
Okay, but liberating hydrogen from hydrazine, that sounds energetic. As Watney himself noted, that's literally how rockets work.
It is incredibly dangerous. It's a highly exothermic reaction, meaning it releases a ton of heat, and it absolutely must be done in a controlled, oxygen-free environment.
Which the HAB, filled with breathable air, most definitely was not.
Not at all. So, on Sol 37, Watney starts this incredibly risky process. He sets up a system to slowly trickle liquid hydrazine over an iridium catalyst. He used a cracked ceramic bowl. He called it his reaction bowl.
Oh.
This reaction liberated hydrogen gas, H, and nitrogen gas, N. The hydrogen, being lighter, was then routed up this makeshift chimney, basically a duct-taped hose, and ignited as it exited.
He burned the hydrogen inside the HAB.
Darn it. Combining it with the HAB's oxygen to create water vapor, H-Aero vapor, which the HAB's water reclaimer system, thankfully, was designed to collect from the air, and the pilot light he used to ignite the hydrogen stream.
What?
Martinez's small wooden cross he'd left behind. Watney literally had to invent fire on Mars using a religious artifact.
That is layers upon layers of improvisation. But what's terrifying is that this brilliant Rube Goldberg setup almost killed him, like immediately.
Yeah, he'd made a critical error in his calculations, a huge oversight. The HAB atmosphere was, breathable, about 21% oxygen. The hydrogen gas coming off the catalyst wasn't just going up the chimney.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. It was mixing with the HAB's oxygen before it reached the flame at the top of the hose. He realized he was turning the entire HAB into his own private Hindenburg if the hydrogen concentration in the air reached just 4%.
Boom. The whole place detonates.
The whole place detonates. Instantly fatal.
So this required some serious, panic engineering over the next couple of sols. Sol 3940, how do you defuse a bomb you've accidentally turned your house into?
His solution was desperate but clever. He had to drastically reduce the oxygen concentration in the HAB atmosphere, get it low enough, below 1% to prevent fire, to make the mixture inert.
Below 1% oxygen. Could he even breathe that? And what about his potato plants? Didn't the soil bacteria need oxygen?
Right. 2 huge problems. Breathing wasn't the main issue short term. He could wear a suit or mask if needed. The bigger immediate worry was the bacteria in his soil. The nitrogen-fixing bacteria were crucial, and they needed some oxygen.
So how did he balance that? Killing the bacteria would kill his food source.
He had to outwit the HAB's own safety systems first. The atmospheric regulator had safety protocols built into its ROM's read-only memory, hardwired limits you weren't supposed to bypass. He found a way, manipulating the system inputs, tricking it essentially, to lower the oxygen content down to that precarious 1% level.
Okay, so he gets the oxygen down, but the bacteria?
To protect the bacteria at that super low oxygen level, he dropped the HAB's internal temperature way down to a frigid 1 degree Celsius.
Wow, freezing.
Basically freezing, yeah. This dramatically slowed the metabolic rate of the soil microbes, reducing their oxygen demand. It allowed him to maintain that non-explosive 1% oxygen atmosphere without immediately killing his farm. It was an incredibly delicate, dangerous balancing act.
And yet, even with all that careful planning, the system failed, didn't it? There was still an explosion.
There was. Not the big HAB detonating one he feared, but the hydrogen generation process itself flashed back or malfunctioned somehow. There was blast inside the HAB. The internal pressure spiked instantly to 1.4 atmospheres.
Enough to knock him around.
Enough to rip his oxygen mask right off his face, and suddenly he's gasping in a 1% oxygen high-pressure environment. His survival, yet again, came down to pure, desperate improvisation.
What did he do?
He scrambled over to Commander Lewis's EVA suit. He'd been using it as a makeshift water tank, calling it the cistern. He literally jammed his head into the neck ring, breathing the residual pure oxygen still trapped inside the suit's torso.
My God.
Just long enough for the HAB's damaged but functioning atmospheric regulator to kick in and start restoring the pressure and oxygen levels. It was then, he notes, that he truly realized his life depended entirely on the quality of his own half-assed handiwork.
Okay, so while Watney is narrowly avoiding blowing himself up on Mars, back on Earth, NASA is basically just looking at satellite photos of a dead landing site, right?
Initially, yes. But around Sol 49, something changes. The NASA director, Venkat Kapoor, he orders new, high-resolution satellite imagery of the Eris 3 site. Maybe just routine, maybe a hunch, we don't know. But it's Mindy Park, working late in satellite control, who spots something, or rather, two things, two anomalies.
What were they?
Things that shouldn't be there if the site was abandoned and Watney was dead. First, the pop tents, the emergency shelters they were set up. That requires human effort. Second, and maybe more tellingly, the solar cells. They were clean.
Clean. Why is that significant?
Because Mars is dusty. Dust storms, general deposition. Those panels should have been covered in a layer of red dust after nearly 50 sols. Clean panels imply someone had been sweeping them recently.
Okay, circumstantial but strong. Was there anything definitive?
Yes. The clincher was Rover 2. Mission logs clearly showed that on Sol 5, before the storm, it had been parked facing towards the hab, plugged in for charging. The new satellite image showed Rover 2 parked facing away from the hab.
Meaning someone had driven it.
Someone had driven it since the crew evacuated. Proof positive of human activity. Mark Watney was alive.
Wow. Imagine that moment at NASA. But it immediately creates a huge ethical problem, doesn't it?
A massive one. NASA leadership, particularly the administrator Teddy Sanders, made the decision not to tell the Army's crew.
The crew's still flying home? Why not?
The rationale, or the official rationale, was crew safety. Hermes was in the middle of a long, complex, deep space journey back to Earth. Telling them their crewmate was alive but stranded and likely doomed could be a massive emotional distraction. A distraction that could potentially jeopardize the safe return of the other 5 astronauts.
Yet not everyone agreed with that secrecy.
No. Mitch Henderson, the Eris 3 flight director, he argued vehemently against it. He felt the crew had an absolute right to know that it was fundamentally wrong to keep it from them. It created a huge internal conflict at NASA.
Meanwhile, Watney, completely unaware of this debate, knows his potato farm won't last forever. He has two options. Somehow make the insane 3,200-kilometer trek to the Eris 4 landing site in Schiaparelli crater, or find a way to talk to Earth.
And NASA, now knowing he's alive, provides an unexpected potential lifeline. They realize the old Pathfinder lander.
The one from the 90s, Carl Sagan Memorial Station.
That's the one. It lost contact way back in 1997, but its last known location was only about 80 kilometers away from Watney's hab.
80 kilometers.
Oh.
That's drivable in the rover.
It is. So Watney undertakes what he calls the Sirius expedition, a multi-day rover trip out to the coordinates NASA provides. He finds Pathfinder, but it's buried under about 4 meters of Martian sand.
4 meters, so he had to dig it out by hand.
Well, with rover tools, but yeah. A massive excavation job. And then he had to somehow move the main lander component, which weighed 200 kilograms even in Martian gravity, plus all its associated bits and pieces, back to his rover for repairs. Another incredible feat of labor.
And the repair itself couldn't have been easy. That thing was ancient technology by this point.
Ancient and not designed to be rebooted after decades buried in sand.
Yeah.
He had to physically cut away the old sand-filled landing balloons. Then the really tricky part. He bypassed its dead batteries and figured out how to wire Pathfinder's solar panel input directly to a constant power feed from his rover. He had to use delicate voltage controllers to step down the rover's power so he wouldn't just instantly fry Pathfinder's old, fragile electronics.
And incredibly, it worked.
It worked. On Sol 97, he gets it powered up, and he sees the lander's high-gain antenna slowly, automatically orient itself, pointing directly at Earth.
Oh, that must have been...
He describes just sitting down in the red dirt next to it and crying. After months of total, crushing silence and isolation, seeing that antenna lock onto Earth,
Yeah.
it was the highest emotional peak of the entire ordeal up to that point.
But okay, it's pointing at Earth. How does he actually talk with it? Pathfinder didn't have, like, a keyboard and screen, did it?
No, its main communication tool was its imager. Basically, a camera on a steerable platform, so communication had to be visual. It's incredibly slow and clunky. NASA had to figure out a system on the fly.
How do they manage that?
They devised a system based on hexadecimal ASCII code. Watney had to physically make signs.
Signs, like holding up cardboard.
Pretty much. He made 17 cards, labeled 0 through 9 and A through F. Those are the 16 digits used in hexadecimal-based 16 math, plus one extra card with a question mark, a query card. He then placed these cards in a circle around the Pathfinder lander, spaced out at precise 21-degree increments.
Okay, I think I see where this is going.
Exactly. NASA, back on Earth, could remotely control Pathfinder's camera platform. They would point the camera at one card, pause, then point it at a second card. Those two cards represented a 2-digit hexadecimal number.
And what does that number mean?
Every two-digit hexadecimal number corresponds to one character in the standard ASCII text encoding system. The system computers use for letters, numbers, punctuations. So, for example, pointing at 4, then 1 hex 41 means the capital letter A. Pointing at 4, then X 48 means H. Pointing at 4, then 9, hex 49 means I. HI.
Painfully slow. Spell everything out 2 hex digits at a time just by pointing a camera.
Excruciatingly slow. Imagine watching that camera slowly swivel from Earth to a card to another card back to Earth just to get one letter. But it worked. And the very first official message NASA spelled out to him after confirming the link.
What was it?
CNHAKRV LK2PT FDFDRPRP4 longs MSG.
Which means?
Can hack rover to talk to Pathfinder. Prepare for long message. They figured out a way to update the rover's software remotely through Pathfinder, allowing them to establish a proper text-based chat. Communication bandwidth went from near zero to, well, still slow, but functional.
That's a huge breakthrough, and it gives NASA confidence, right? They can plan a real rescue now. His potato farming bought him time until maybe Sol 900.
Exactly. With communication established and the farm thriving, NASA planned the IRIS supply probe. It was designed to launch during the next optimal Hohmann transfer window, a standard, relatively low-energy trajectory. It would take about 8 to 9 months to reach Mars. It was the safe, sensible, by-the-book plan.
But Mars doesn't really do by the book, does it?
Not for Watney, it seems. On Sol 122, disaster strikes again. The Hab's airlock 1, one of the main airlocks he'd been using constantly. It fails. Catastrophically. Canvas fatigue, basically. Ran out from cycles.
Fails how? Like a leak.
Like an explosion. It blows outward, shooting Watney, who was nearby, about 40 meters across the Martian surface. His helmet faceplate cracks, and the entire Hab structure instantly deflates, collapses.
Oh my God, his farm.
Wiped out. Instantly exposed to the Martian atmosphere and sub-zero temperatures, everything died. And his carefully calculated survival date plummeted from Sol 900 down to Sol 584.
Suddenly, that 8-month supply ship journey is way too long.
Way too long. The window for survival slammed shut. JPL, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, was thrown into this insane high-stakes emergency mode. They now had only 48 days to design, build, test, and launch a new supply probe, IRIS, from basically scratch. An impossible schedule.
How do they even attempt that? You can't just build an interplanetary probe in like a month and a half.
They had to break every rule, take massive risks. They needed a huge, powerful rocket booster immediately. So they essentially stole the massive Delta IX booster that was already assigned and prepping for the Eagle I-3 Saturn probe mission, just commandeered it. And worse, from a safety perspective, they had to skip almost all the standard time-based inspections and testing protocols. Stuff designed to catch flaws over weeks or months. They just didn't have the time. It was a huge gamble, driven by desperation.
A gamble that didn't pay off.
No. That rush, that cutting of corners, it proved fatal for the mission. During the Delta IX launch, subtle vibrations, a shimmy occurred. Nothing major, usually. But inside the IRIS probe's payload fairing, the emergency food supplies weren't packed perfectly. Specifically, protein cubes had shifted slightly, creating an imbalance. That tiny imbalance, amplified by the launch vibrations, caused connecting bolts holding the probe's aeroshell to shear off.
Oh, no.
The probe broke apart on ascent. Total mission failure. IRIS crashed back to Earth, and NASA had to face the stark reality. As Teddy Sanders put it, we only get one shot at this. If we fail, Mark Watney dies. Their first shot had failed.
Okay, so IRIS is gone. Watney's food is running out much faster now. His only option is the 3,200-kilometer drive to Schiaparelli Crater to the Ares 4 MAV. He has to reach it before the Hermes can possibly swing by on Sol 549. How does he even begin to prepare for a drive like that?
He has to turn Rover 2 and its detachable trailer into essentially a long-haul mobile hab, a life support system on wheels. It's another massive engineering project.
Starting with power and heat, I assume. You can't drive across Mars without those.
Absolutely. First, power. He scavenges 28 of the big solar cells from his now useless hab farm site. He wires the rover's battery together with 2 spare batteries from the hab, connecting them in parallel. This gives him a much larger total energy storage, 36 kilowatt hours.
Which lets him do what in terms of driving?
His calculations showed it would allow him to drive about 100 kilometers per day, but only for 4 out of every 5 Martian days. The 5th day would be dedicated entirely to stopping and recharging the batteries using the solar array. Slow progress, but sustainable.
Okay, power sorted. But Mars is incredibly cold, especially at night or during storms. How does he stay warm for weeks on the road?
This is where one of the most controversial pieces of equipment comes back into play. The RTG, the radioisotope thermoelectric generator.
The plutonium
The
box.
plutonium box, exactly. Commander Lewis, following safety protocols, had buried it 4 kilometers away from the HAB site before the mission started proper, just in case of accidents. It uses the heat from decaying plutonium-238 to generate a steady, reliable stream of heat and a bit of electricity.
So Watney had to go dig it up. That sounds risky.
Very. Both digging it up and handling it, and then having it inside his tiny rover cabin for weeks. But it was essential. He retrieves it and installs it inside the rover cabin. The RTG provides constant, reliable heat. He rigged up a clever system using a small water reservoir. He bubbled the cabin's return air through this RTG heated water.
Ah, like a rudimentary radiator and humidifier.
Exactly. A simple, effective way to distribute the heat evenly and keep him from freezing. Plus, it added a little crucial humidity to the dry air. The RTG also chipped in about 100 watts of continuous supplemental power, which was a nice bonus.
Okay, power and heat. Check. But the most terrifying modification, I think, was moving the life support, right? Taking the HAB's big three systems, the oxygenator, the atmospheric regulator, the water reclaimer, and putting them in the trailer. That required cutting a hole in the rover itself.
In the trailer, yeah. Which was pressurized. It was an enormous structural risk. Carbon composite hulls are strong, but not designed to have giant holes cut in them on Mars with basic tools. He used a rock drill, powered by a direct line run from the HAB's main power system before he left. And he spent 4 agonizing days meticulously drilling a line of 760 tiny connected holes across the trailer's hull.
Like perforating it.
Exactly, like perforating it so he could then carefully remove that large section without cracking the whole structure. He then mounted the big 3 life support systems inside the trailer, sealed the whole thing up, and presumably prayed it would hold pressure for the entire journey. Every one of those 760 drill holes was a potential leak, a potential failure point. The sheer time and effort involved just highlights how difficult basic construction is on Mars.
And just when he's got his mobile home ready, relying on Pathfinder for updates and navigation checks, disaster strikes again. Sol 196. His last link to Earth goes silent.
Yeah, a stupid, simple, brutal accident. He's working on the rover, getting the power systems finalized. He leaned the exposed rock drill, which was still connected to the HAB's powerful 36-volt, 9-amp power source. He leaned it against the metal workbench he was using.
Oh, I see where this is going. Electrical short.
A massive short circuit. The current traveled through the metal workbench, through a thin layer of mylar insulation he had down, and directly into Pathfinder's metal casing, which was sitting on the same bench.
And Pathfinder's electronics.
Pathfinder's delicate, decades-old communication electronics. They were designed to run on maybe 50 milliamps. The 9 amps, that's 9,000 milliamps from the drill, instantly fried the entire system. Smoke, sparks, dead. Just like that.
Isolated. Again.
Yeah.
Completely blind. No way to talk to NASA. No way for them to talk to him.
Utterly alone. And it's at this point realizing he's completely reliant on his own skills, his own navigation, his own engineering. That's when he makes his famous log entry. He declares Mars to be international waters.
And since his plan involves commandeering the Ares 4 MAV, a spacecraft belonging to a future mission.
That makes him, in his own words, a space pirate.
Okay, so the space pirate needs to prep for his voyage. What did he do?
He becomes incredibly methodical, survival mode fully engaged. Knowing that digestion itself uses energy, he takes all his remaining potatoes, cooks them, and then freezes them solid outside the rover.
Why freeze them?
Cooked and frozen food is generally easier for the body to break down and absorb calories from, maximizing energy intake from his dwindling supply. He also salvages the canvas from the collapsed HAB, cuts it up, and makes a smaller, hopefully more leak-proof dome to seal off the original HAB structure he's leaving behind, just in case. And he prepares the bedroom for his trip, a stolen pop tent airlock attachment.
Like a little pressurized tent attached to the rover.
Essentially, yeah. A small inflatable annex attached to the rover airlock, giving him a bit more room to sleep and move around during the long journey.
And then, Sol 449, the journey begins. 3,200 kilometers across Mars. Navigating how? He's lost his GPS, essentially.
Pure celestial mechanics. Old school navigation. He relies on the sextant, yes,
Yeah.
like an ancient mariner, to measure the angle of the star Deneb above the horizon. That gives him his latitude.
Okay, what about longitude?
For longitude, he times the precise moment that Phobos, the larger, faster Martian moon, sets below the horizon each day. Comparing that timing to predicted charts allows him to estimate his east-west position. It's crude, requires constant observation, painstaking calculations, cross-referencing with the rough maps he has, but it works.
Incredible. But the terrain is the only challenge, right? He runs into a massive dust storm in North Vallis.
He does, and this is a big problem because dust storms block sunlight, reducing his solar power. And worse, satellite imagery from orbit can't see through the storm, so NASA couldn't have warned him or helped him navigate around it even if he still had Pathfinder. He was driving blind into potentially zero visibility conditions.
How does he handle that? Just wait it out.
Waiting could take weeks, time he doesn't have, so he has to invent a way to map the storm himself from the ground. He jury-rigs 2 homemade power loggers.
Power loggers.
Yeah, simple devices. Each one is just a small, independent solar cell connected to a power meter with one of his stolen EVA suit cameras pointed at the meter's display, recording the reading. He drives out, drops one logger, drives 40 kilometers in another direction, drops the second one.
Triangulation.
Exactly. By comparing the solar power readings from his main rover array with the readings being recorded at those 2 remote points, he can get a rough idea of the storm's opacity, how thick the dust is in different locations. This allows him to create a crude, real-time map of the storm's shape and, crucially, its direction of movement.
So he can figure out how to drive out of it.
He calculated the storm's vector and drove perpendicular to its path, essentially skirting around its densest edge. This brilliant piece of improvisation allowed him to escape the dust storm with only a 4-sol delay, instead of potentially being stuck for weeks. It saved his schedule.
Okay, final section. He's closing in on Schiaparelli crater, the area's foresight. But Mars throws one last, potentially fatal curveball at him.
Yeah, the terrain entering the Schiaparelli Basin is treacherous. There's a steep 1.5-kilometer drop in elevation down something called the entrance ramp. And as he's carefully descending, the rover hits an unexpected invisible ridge of extremely soft, deep powder, like talcum powder.
Oh, no.
The rover digs in and rolls completely over. The trailer, with his vital life support systems, detaches and flips forward, landing nearby.
Is he hurt? Is the equipment damaged?
He's alive, miraculously, just banged up. But he's immobilized. The rover's on its side. The trailer's detached. This accident costs him 4 precious souls he absolutely cannot afford to lose, frantically trying to figure out how to right a 3,000-kilogram rover and trailer by himself.
How does he even do that?
He has to use the one piece of reliable, heavy-duty gear he has left. Ironically, it's the electrical cable, the power cable, the very same one he used to accidentally fry Pathfinder. His lucky cable, he calls it.
What does he do with it?
He anchors one end to a rock outcrop, drilling deep into the regolith for a solid hold. Then he has to figure out a way to use the rover's own wheel motors, maybe some kind of pulley system. I'm not sure the logs detail the exact mechanics, but he has to winch the massive 3,000-kilogram rover back onto its wheels. In reduced Martian gravity, sure, but still an immense physical task involving leverage and sheer desperation. The physical exertion plus the repairs needed after the roll, extreme.
But he manages it.
Yeah.
And he finally gets close enough.
He finally gets close enough to pick up the homing signal. The Ares-4 MAV, the Mars ascent vehicle for the next mission, is sitting there, pre-positioned. It's broadcasting the standard Ares-3 HAB homing signal as planned. He locates it about 50 kilometers away, drives up to it, she's made it, and he immediately starts feeding it oxygen and nitrogen from his rover's tanks, getting it ready, preparing for the Hermes flyby, now incredibly close, Sol 549.
Okay, so he's there.
Yeah.
But back on Earth, JPL and NASA realize the MAV, as designed, is too heavy, right? It can't reach the necessary speed and altitude for the rendezvous with Hermes doing its high-speed flyby.
Exactly. The Ares-4 MAV was designed for a standard, slow, vertical ascent to a waiting orbital vehicle, not this high-energy intercept trajectory. It needed to lose a lot of weight, fast. This leads to what they internally called MAV mutilation. Watney received a set of terrifying instructions from Earth via the MAV's comms system.
MAV mutilation, let's break that down. This is intentionally taking a certified human-rated spacecraft and ripping parts off it.
Ripping critical parts off it, yeah. Everything non-essential for a set had to go to save weight. The windows, gone. The entire nose airlock assembly, removed, discarded. A huge weight saving, but structurally risky. Hull panel 19, taken off. The auxiliary fuel pump, ripped out.
Okay, that's bad enough.
But the single most dangerous modification, they instructed him to remove one of the Stage 1 ascent engines.
Remove an engine? How does it even fly straight?
It seriously compromised the entire ascent profile. It risked stability, thrust vectoring, everything. But the calculated weight savings were deemed absolutely necessary, worth the massive risk of the whole thing tumbling out of control during launch. It was that desperate.
And visually, Taking off the nose cone and panels left a giant hole in the front, right?
A giant hole, which they instructed him to patch with leftover HAB canvas, the same stuff that failed on his HAB airlock, secured with resin. He was literally told he would be launching into orbit under a tarp, quote, like a hastily loaded pickup truck.
Unbelievable. While he's doing this high-risk space mechanic work, the overall rescue plan has also radically changed back at JPL, thanks to one guy.
Rich Purnell, an astrodynamicist at JPL. While NASA management was still focused on that failed IRIS probe concept, maybe trying a second one, Purnell was running orbital calculations, and he found something unexpected. A loophole in orbital mechanics.
The Rich Purnell maneuver.
The Rich Purnell maneuver. He discovered that Hermes didn't need to wait months for supplies. Using its current velocity, combined with a carefully calculated gravitational slingshot around Mars during the flyby, it could alter its trajectory immediately to loop back around and eventually return to Earth. It completely eliminated the need for a separate supply ship and the months of waiting.
But it was complex, right? Dangerous for the Hermes crew, too.
Incredibly complex. It required burning way more fuel than planned, extending their mission by hundreds of days. It was such an out-of-the-box calculation that Vogel, the Hermes navigator and physicist, had to independently reverse engineer the math from the raw data Purnell sent just to confirm it was actually viable.
And it needed international cooperation, too, didn't it? For the supplies Hermes would now need.
Yes. Because the maneuver was so fuel-intensive and extended the mission, Hermes needed supplies delivered to them near Earth before they committed to the Mars flyby. The only booster capable of launching that much mass that quickly was China's Tiantian rocket. NASA had to make a deal with the CNSA, the Chinese Space Agency. It became this massive international effort, all hinging on Purnell's brilliant, risky calculation.
Okay, Sol 549, launch day. Watney climbs into a stripped-down, patched-up, underweight, overpowered MAV.
And launches. The acceleration, because of the missing mass and modified engines, was brutal. Far higher G-forces than planned, higher than almost any manned launch in history. He described being shoved back so hard he literally couldn't move or even breathe properly, and that canvas patch over the nose.
Ripped away instantly.
Just shredded the moment it hit the thicker atmosphere. He's flying uphill in an open cockpit, basically.
Hermes is closing fast, having killed its rotation for the rendezvous. Commander Lewis is determined not to lose him again, and they realize they're still not going to match velocities perfectly.
The MAV is still slightly off trajectory, slightly off velocity. They need one last, final, desperate push to make the intercept work. Lewis makes another command decision that goes completely against protocol. Use the airlock.
As a bomb.
As a controlled explosive device. Vogel, the crew's chemist and physicist, quickly has to improvise. He creates a makeshift pipe bomb in Airlock 2 using sugar from the galley, liquid oxygen, and an electrical wire as a detonator.
They blew the door off their own spaceship.
They oriented the Hermes carefully, opened the inner airlock door, sealed it, then detonated the bomb inside the airlock chamber. The explosion ripped the outer airlock door clean off, venting atmosphere out into space in a controlled directional blast. It acted like a small thruster, providing just enough delta V, just enough change in velocity, to nudge Hermes onto a perfect intercept course with the MAV.
Pure insanity. And the actual rescue.
That fell to Beck, the mission's EVA specialist. He went out on the MMU, the manned maneuvering unit. The jetpack flew across the gap between the two tumbling vehicles, tethered himself to the MAV, found Watney strapped into his seat, injured. He'd broken a rib during the high-G launch, but alive. Beck secured him and brought him back across to Hermes.
Watney's first words back on comms after that insane launch.
Perfectly captured the absurdity and terror. I'm on a ship with no control panel, just sitting in the MAV's stripped-out shell. But his next transmission, once he knew Beck had him, pure relief, pure triumph. Despite smelling, as the crew later noted, absolutely terrible after 500-plus sols alone. This is the happiest day of my life. Knowing he was safe, finally safe, even with another 211 days of space travel ahead of him until Earth.
What a journey. Looking back, Watney's survival really rested on him being three different people almost, didn't it? He had to be the botanist.
Yeah, inventing that whole ecosystem, using the night soil, meticulously maximizing the potato yield. That bought him the time.
And then he had to be the engineer.
Rigging the RTG for heat, figuring out the rover modifications, the power systems, even performing that terrifying structural destruction of the MAV hull based on instructions.
And finally, he had to be the mathematician.
Navigating 3,200 kilometers across Mars using tools that were ancient even by Earth standards, a sextant, the timing of Phobos's orbit, calculating fuel needs, water production, oxygen levels, constant calculation.
And the common thread through all that, all those incredible improvisations, seems to be leftover stuff.
Right.
Latent capacity built into the mission he wasn't supposed to use.
That's a really key point. Redundancy that was never intended for this kind of catastrophe. The HAB had extra CO2 filters beyond the 31-day need. The MDV lander had unused hydrazine fuel left over from a perfect landing. Lewis buried the RTG far away for safety, inadvertently preserving it for him. These unintended backups, these margins, they were the absolute foundation that allowed him to survive one near-fatal disaster after another.
What's truly fascinating, though, is that the entire process, really from Sol 6, when Watney seals his own suit breach with his blood, all the way to the Hermes crew detonating a bomb in their own airlock to reach him. It was all based on constantly, deliberately pushing these incredibly complex, expensive, life-critical systems way past their design safety limits.
Absolutely. They had to bypass safety protocols written into the computers. They had to hack ROM chips. They had to structurally mutilate a certified ascent vehicle. They blew up part of their own ship. Everything went against procedure.
Which really raises a powerful question, doesn't it? Something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. If survival on a completely uninhabitable planet like Mars requires such a radical disregard for established procedure, for safety limits, what does that really imply about the actual boundaries of human capability versus the boundaries imposed by our own safety protocols?
It seems like genius, or at least survival in the extreme, often lives precisely in that space just outside the official safety margin. A provocative thought for sure.
A profound thought to end on.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into just pure, high-stakes, relentless resourcefulness.
Yeah, it's been great. We'll catch you next time.